Back everyone to the Hearthstone Championship Tour, America's Spring Championship. I'm Raven, and joined once again on the desk with Brian Kibler. We have this next match coming up, which is going to be the final match of the day, where we work out who's going to join the previous three players into that top four spot.
Yeah, this is actually the match that I've been looking forward to the most. As Bradfordlee said in that interview, I think these are two of the players who bring with them some of the strongest pedigree, some of the most exciting lineups in my mind, and it'll be really exciting to see them go at one another here.
Yeah, the interesting thing here is like Bradfordlee actually is the only player not to bring Warlock.
Yeah, not just in this event, but between this event and the European Championship as well. So most players have chosen to bring Warlock, mostly Zoo, but there's a few Reno Lock as well.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting here as we see the first game, which is going to be Druid versus Hunter. And from Bradfordlee, this Druid actually is another Cthulhu Druid.
Yeah, Cthulhu Druid, as we mentioned earlier, is a deck that kind of came out of nowhere as far as popularity in this particular event. We only saw AKA Wonder bring Cthulhu Druid in the Europe Championship, but it has really sort of burst onto the scene in the Americas. Many of the top competitors on the ladder were playing Cthulhu Druid in just the most recent ranked play season.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting one as the guys just way up the mulligans. It looks like Rosty's with his more aggressive Hunter. And it looks like he's got a pretty good curve. That Abusive Sergeant, obviously not the best one-drop you could want for the first game, but it's not looking too bad overall.
Rosty's Hunter deck is one of the decks that I am most excited about in this particular lineup. Most of the Hunter decks we've seen have followed the same kind of pattern of the mid-range Hunter deck, playing the Houndmaster up to the Savannah Highmane into Call of the Wild, but Rosty's going a little bit more of the kind of hybrid Hunter style we saw prior to the introduction of the standard format. He starts much lower. He has those Abusive Sergeants that we see, Argent Squire, and then sort of curves up with more charge minions like Argent Horse Rider, but still has the finisher of Call of the Wild, which is so powerful that even in your aggro deck, you play your 8-drop.
Yeah, I mean, because, let's be honest, even as an aggressive deck, sometimes games do go late, and you do want to play that incredibly powerful card. But it starts off with a Raven Idol there going to Moonfire. So Bradford just deciding that he wants that sort of free on-the-spot removal for any of the one-health creatures that might be coming down, or just to help do the additional damage combined with something like a Rat.
But unfortunately for him, Rosty does not have a start of Fiery Bat or Abusive Sergeant for him to Moonfire. There is this huge Toad. Then Bradfordlee, he actually has a couple of options here. He could choose to play his Beckoner of Evil. He could also choose to Moonfire Hero Power. He could Living Roots. Decides to just go ahead and play his minion to start things off here.
Yeah, I think the Beckoner of Evil is really good. You really start to just ramp up that Cthulhu as you really want to hit 10 as quick as possible on the Cthulhu to be able to activate all the cool buffs and abilities we see from the cards later on. And also, it just directly challenges the huge Toad, and you don't really care about the 1 damage going face at this point in the game. You just want to be able to slow the Hunter down and stop like the snowball effect early on.
Yeah, and now Rosty, he has a couple of options. I have to imagine that we'll see the Toad attack and Flame Jugger gets played. The real question is where the Toad goes. He could choose to trade the Toad in or just go face. My guess is that he'll probably go face, especially given that he's choosing
if he's going to play the Flame
Jugger first, he's going face.
Yeah. I mean, he is playing the more aggressive deck, and to be honest, although Hunter has the hero power and some form of burn from hand potentially later on, like, if the Druid gets Taunt Walls up, we saw that in the game we cast earlier today, where once that Taunt Wall goes up, it's very difficult to break down.
Yeah, so Rosty needs to get the damage in where he can. One of the cards that was very much a staple of Face Hunter decks for a long time was Ironbeak Owl. It was a card that would give the Face Hunter decks a tool to break through those late game taunts. That's since the nerf to Ironbeak Owl now costs 1 more. Not a card that Rosty's chosen to play in his deck. And here we actually see the Moonfire getting the job done.
Yeah, getting some work done, and that the Beckoner taking a lot of those 1 damage death rattles to the face there. But the only problem now is Bradfordlee's done a good job of clearing up, but his hand's looking a little bit low. He does have Azure Drake next turn, but that's almost a guaranteed play, unless maybe Druid of the Claw comes out or something along those lines. But he's running low, and he's just quickly running out of answers to the Hunter, whereas Rosty's hand's looking pretty reasonable already with the Wolf, and then a follow-up of the Dire Wolf itself to maybe those tokens, just buff the tokens a little bit and get some more value from that.
Wrath is an interesting draw for Bradfordlee here. He now has the ability to cycle the Wrath and Hero Power and clear the Horse Rider off instead of playing the Azure Drake this turn. Looks like he's definitely taking his time with this decision. Decides to go with the Azure Drake. wants to use his mana more efficiently. If he were to make the other play, he'd be stuck with the Drake going into 6 mana turn, which doesn't really give you a great place to weave that in with any other play.
Yeah, and I think as well, this just presents a minion to Rosty. And if Rosty chooses to trade and kill the Drake, because it is kind of a threat, especially with that spell power, in combination with cards like Wrath and Swipe, it's going to get a lot more work done. But if he chooses to trade into it, then like Bradford's probably okay with that, because it's just another turn that he's not took any more face damage, and then he can just start to really go into the big driven turns.
Yeah, and Rosty, though, he is just going to go to the face, it looks like. Well, almost certainly now that he's already committed his Wolf and won't be able to clear off the Azure Drake.
Yeah, this is going to be huge, though, because Bradford has the Wrath to be able to kill off the 3/3, and then he can just swipe face if he wants and then trade with the Drake.
He could also just attack in Wrath the cycle the Wrath on the Divine Shield and also swipe.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of ways he can get this board cleared and leave himself with a minion at the end and even draw cards in the process. So definitely a really good turn here for Bradfordlee.
It looks like he's going to favor trade in first and then going for the swipe. And also he's drawing to Fandral, which, although we might not see this turn, is at least, you know, he's got a good minion, a threatening minion that Rosty is going to have to want to deal with.
It's especially powerful with the Wrath, which is likely going to be remaining in his hand at the end of this exchange, because we see that cycle plus swipe the face attack, leaving him with that 4/1 Drake and Rosty with no board whatsoever.
Yeah, Bradfordlee's got Dark Arakoa in hand now as well, and that's one of the big taunt walls you want to start stacking up against Hunter.
And Rosty, he does have that Dangerthorn Tiger right on time if he were to choose to drop that down. But that Azure Drake is still pretty threatening.
Yeah, if you just play the Tiger, it's sort of it's an investment into the following turns, right? As opposed to doing anything too crazy this turn. He is going to favor the bow and potentially hero power here.
He has a Direwolf Alpha. He might choose to play that. No, he's just going to go ahead and hero power.
Yeah, I think it's just weaving in those points of damage is going to be important because we're steadily getting towards the turns where the taunts are going to start coming down.
Well, I think we're probably going to see them start right now. Dark Arakoa, really big taunt wall, especially with Bradford still at 21 health. That's a very healthy life total, but no.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you're not under too much pressure and it's so reasonable life, you might want to put Fandral down, because then the fear is in Rosty where, okay, there could be anything in his hand that benefits from Fandral, and any of those cards are actually super impactful here.
And Rosty here, he has kind of an interesting selection of options. He can go ahead and play Direwolf Alpha to enable kill command, take down the Fandral, then could attack down the Disciple of Cthulhu. The big problem here, of course, is that Bradford's still at a really high life total. And as we were mentioning before, getting to the stage of the game where he's going to be able to drop those big taunts to stop the minion damage from really having a great chance to get in.
Yeah, he has gone for the Tiger. I wouldn't have minded the Direwolf into kill command, and you can still play the Squire. And what this does is just set up multiple minions as you edge towards the Call the Wild turn. So as we've said before, the more minions you have when you play Call the Wild, the even more powerful that card gets.
Amusingly, this, despite being buffed by Fandral, is exactly the same as a normal Wrath because it's just hitting a Divine Shield.
All that extra damage wasted on the Divine Shield. What a shame. But there is Cthulhu, and again, one of yet another golden old god we've seen so far today. So we'll see if we can get the work done for Bradford, as he's looking in pretty good shape.
It's interesting that he seems to be holding off on playing this Dark Arakoa. His opponent does have a Tiger that's starting to hit him in the face. I'm curious what his sort of reasoning is for not dropping this big taunt.
Yeah, this is interesting because the Dark Arakoa, this allows Bradford to clear off the 1/1, right? So that's the plan. But the Dark Arakoa gives +3/+3 to Cthulhu, puts up a taunt wall that trades with the Tiger anyway, and doesn't just trade with the Tiger and the 1/1. And also he can just Cthulhu next turn. Oh no, he's actually one turn away, sorry. He sets up the Cthulhu for turn 10 to be able to just finish the game, but you might not need it.
I mean, this is a play that does allow Bradfordlee to get quite a bit of damage onto the board. And Rosty's actually under a lot of pressure himself. He's only at 14 life. Can't really use all this burn in his hand to just go to the face. But looks like not playing the Arakoa this turn does open up a lot of damage that can hit Bradfordlee. But here, Rosty is just going ahead and clearing off as a bunch of the damage from the board, getting 6 damage in here. I'm a little curious that he didn't choose to play He could have chosen to play the Abusive Sergeant there, which would at least insist on Bradfordlee using his hero power to clear it or something of the like.
Yeah, I think it's just the hit wanting to hero power every turn. I mean,
Well,
so it works out the same.
Wild in your hand, though.
Yeah, it kind of works out the same overall.
It ends up, in this particular instance, does end up probably being better.
So I imagine, at last, we're going to see Dark Arakoa this turn.
Yeah. But I mean, Bradford took a lot of damage this turn, you know, to sort of, or the previous turn to sort of hold off in this Dark Arakoa now.
Yeah, and the problem is Cthulhu next turn is not going to feel as good because there's going to be multiple minions on the board from the Call of the Wild.
Yeah. All right, it's just going to go ahead and hero power, and then we will see the Amber Weaver take down the Dire Wolf.
Yep, so, you know, if there's an option between Call of the Wild and Animal Companion Abusive, it's normally going to be Call of the Wild most of the time.
I would imagine it's likely what we're going to see.
So, like, the Abusive makes a very clean trade with the Tiger, but then you follow up his Animal Companion, and then that's... is he going for it? Wow,
right,
okay.
This does allow him to get a hero power in here, and
That's
can
true.
kind of disguise his Call of the Wild, I suppose. Though this, I think Cthulhu might be big enough that it is pretty close to guaranteed to end this game, if not guaranteed.
Yep, having that Cthulhu available is
13.
huge. It's going to be 13, and that is going to be enough. And Bradfordlee takes the first game with his Cthulhu Druid, and just showing the power of one of the old gods there.
And Rosty just didn't quite get enough damage in early on that game. His Hunter deck is a bit more aggressively focused, and he really needed to sort of pile that damage in early on, but not enough, and Bradford was able to take it down.
Yep, so before we go into the next game, though, we took a few minutes to sit down with Bradfordlee and learn more about living a sustainable lifestyle.
While playing Hearthstone, Bradfordlee keeps himself nourished by eating fresh fruits and vegetables from his own home garden.
So I'm generally a very conservation-minded human being. You could say my general ethos is based around the idea of doing everything in life to be more conservation-minded, because I think it's an important aspect to society as a whole these days. But we live in a very modernized society, and that puts me in a position where, you know, I still want to be a very modern human being playing Hearthstone, a digital card game. But at the same time, I still love getting back to nature and rejuvenating through nature. I love gardening. I love being involved with the idea of reducing my carbon output as a whole. And I think that really defines who I am as a human being for the most part. In 2009, I spent the entire summer bicycling across America from Florida to California. And during that time frame, I worked with Habitat for Humanity along the way, building at build sites. And it was really one of the greatest experiences of my life. I totally suggest checking something out like that because it gets you a rejuvenation again, that kind of back to nature feeling. Championships can be a very stressful environment, and due to stress to some extent, I decided I'd go on a trip. And so after this tournament is over, I'm going to be going out to a place called the Boundary Waters to enjoy some reprieve from society as a whole and rejuvenate myself and be able to come back a better Hearthstone player. And when I make BlizzCon, then I'll be even better at becoming the best player for Hearthstone.
If Malfurion, the druid hero, was a human being, I have a feeling he'd look a lot like Bradfordlee.
Very, very relevant insight into Bradfordlee there, especially coming off the back of a Druid win. Was there ever a chance he was going to lose, Kibler?
I was going to say, only appropriate he gets his opening win with Druid after that introduction.
Exactly. I'd be very afraid if I had to go up against him and he was like, I'm just going to play Druid. I'd be like, okay, you win.
He must protect the wild, man.
Yeah, it's looking pretty impressive so far, but this is a best of 7, and these guys have a long way to go yet.
Can't play Druid again.
No, and he can't play it again. We've got to make sure he doesn't just relock it in and be like, no, I really want to play Druid. But the next match is starting as we go into game 2, and Bradfordlee is going for his Rogue versus Rosty's Shaman. So Rosty, actually, I believe, has got a really, really good matchup here. And in Conquest, you have to you pick one of your decks that's left versus against one of their decks that's left. You don't know what they're going to pick, but Rosty definitely won the lottery here, I think.
Yeah, the Shaman deck is typically one that tends to have an advantage over Rogue. Rogue wants as much time as it can get, trying to set up big turns with Gadgets and Auctioneer, preparation, lots of spells, whereas Shaman on the other side of the coin, well, not literally the other side of the coin, but definitely wants to end the game as quickly as possible, looking to close out with big overload minions, Doomhammer, burn spells, and definitely a study in opposites here.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of the coin, Kibler, Bradfordlee on the Rogue does have the coin, which is super important in almost every matchup anyway, but really important when you need to sort of stem an aggressive tide that you're going to find from the normal aggro shaming list. But he does have Backstab and double Eviscerate coin and Edwin, so there is a huge chance that Bradfordlee can get at least a decent-sized Edwin down, and then that's going to put in so much work just trading and trading with the minions that the Shame's going to play.
Yeah, Edwin is one of the cards that can give the Rogue the initiative against the Shaman. Shaman, all of its removal, at least in this particular build, because it doesn't play Hex, all of its removal is damage-based. So any damage that goes to a minion is damage that isn't going to the opponent's face. And if you get a big enough Van Cleef early on, it can take either a lot of their board or a lot of their burn from hand in order to actually remove it. So it can set the Shaman really far behind.
Yeah, and not the most aggressive opening from Shame. You know, we don't see the Trog into Tome Golem, but this is, you know, the second best, right? 1 drop into 2 drop is still going to be pretty good for Rosty here, and he does have the follow-up if he wants a Feral Spirit next turn, but going to be interested to see how Bradfordlee takes this turn. As you said, he can do sort of crazy things to Brother Van Cleef, but nothing quite adds up. Like the backstab would kind of have to just be used removing the shield. If he had Fan of Knives, then maybe backstabbing the 2-3 could have been a little bit better, just to set up for a bit of a board clear afterwards.
Yeah, not a terribly exciting hand. If he had a preparation, this hand would be
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, to be able to go.
Yeah, prep this would be insane.
Coin, probably not prep coin. It's the wrong order. Done that
We've
before.
all done it. We have all done it. Never again.
But yeah, he'd be able to set up both the ability to use significant removal and build a big Van Cleef, but the pair of Eviscerates here doesn't really have a great way to leverage them. There's no great backstab into Eviscerate either, because, as you mentioned, the only other target is that Divine Shield, really. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him just dagger up this turn. It's a very weak play, but one that will is actually going to go ahead.
It looks like he's going for it.
He's just going to make the Van Cleef. He just wants to make this big Van Cleef. The problem with this is, well, A, Flame Tongue Totem. Flame Tongue Totem can just remove this Van Cleef entirely. And B, it really leaves his hand pretty much all in. And that Lightning Bolt is actually a huge draw from Rosty as well, because it means that he can kill the Van Cleef and keep his Flame Juggler in play as well.
Yeah, this is huge. Being able to just save a minion, because I was just about to say, if he does kill the Van Cleef, which is a priority at the moment, he does lose both minions, and then suddenly the Flame Tongue is quite easy for Rogue to deal with a lot of the time. They do normally have that kind of answer, whether it be Deadly Poison, Eviscerate. You know, there are a lot of options, but the Lightning Bolt does open up the defensive play and to hold on to a minion. There's still the other option of just playing Feral Spirit and just saying, well, you've got Van Cleef, but there's now 4 minions on board, and you can only attack once with it per turn.
I think the bigger problem for Bradfordlee here is that his hand is now just super awkward. You know, he has Eviscerate, and he has another Eviscerate. No real way to enable either of them.
Yeah, it's definitely awkward now. Like Thalnos, not going to help.
Yeah.
There might be a chance where we just see Thalnos played, because Dagger Up doesn't do too much. At least Thalnos will cycle at some point, either his opponent's turn, or he can trade it into and take advantage of the spell power in the following turn.
And Rosty now, only one possibility here, at least as far as cards in hand are concerned. He can use his hero power, just make himself a totem, or Feral Spirit, just continue to apply pressure. Looks to me, he's definitely debating his future turn mana usage, because if he does Feral Spirits here, he doesn't really have any play other than totem next turn either.
Yeah, I think you might go with Feral Spirits just because it's the strongest play on the board immediately, and you can just rely on getting something you can play. We've not seen any Tuscar Totemics. We've not seen any Totem Golems, any Trogs. You know, the odds on him drawing something playable next turn is pretty high, and this just puts the most pressure on as quickly as possible.
And Bradfordlee picks up a Tomb Pillager off of the Death Rattle, which does give him a play which is reasonable here. The problem being, of course, that would just trade directly into one of the minions from Flame Tongue. So he's just going to go ahead and fire off Eviscerate plus Eviscerate, killing the Flame Tongue and that Flame Juggler as well.
Yeah, and this shows how dangerous this matchup is for the Rogue, because, the fact that he's just going Evis just to clear off 2 minions that don't themselves have too high attack. Obviously, the Flame Tongue represents 4, if there's 2 minions, 1 minion inside of it. But the Rogue, even after clearing there from Bradford, is still under a lot of pressure as the second Flame Tongue Totem comes out, and it allows Rosty to push for 8 this turn, which is huge.
Yeah, this is definitely a rough spot for Bradfordlee. He has, some minions he can play, but he plays a 5-drop minion, it's just going to die to one of these Spirit Wolves that's already in play. Oh, the preparation into the Shadow Strike, though. This is a big draw for Bradfordlee, able to clear off the Flame Tongue Toto, which will allow his Azure Drake to at least get some foothold on this board.
Yeah, there's going to be an option now. Rosty's going to Hero Power. It looks like it's interesting. I didn't know whether he was going to weigh up trading one of the minions in the Lightning Bolt, but at this point, with the Flame Reed Faceless, he's just going to say, look, you're on 12 health now. He's just going to go super aggressive. He has the Lightning Bolt for burn from hand. And he's going to say to Bradford, you're going to need to do some very impressive things to claw out this one.
And some sort of poison will help him a little bit. Ooh, it is a Fire Bloom, I think is the name.
Sure, it is.
It's the 2 damage one.
Yeah.
I know from the picture it's the 2 damage one.
Yeah.
I think it's called Fire Bloom. But the problem is that Fire Bloom does 3 with the spell power, but there's a 7/7 in play.
Exactly. He can clear off the 2 of the wolves this turn, but there's still 8 damage on board. And if he might have to like prep Fire Bloom Hero Power or something if he wants to clear off the 1/1 as well, but that's just a 1 damage over the course of 1 turn anyway.
Yeah, it still represents the same amount of damage. He is actually going to do exactly that, though. He wants to try and ensure there's as little damage on the board as possible. Not many uses for that prep after this, in any case, but here he's leaving his opponent with just the 7/7 in play.
Yeah, he's spending the prep not to have repeat damage from the 1 damage. But look, this is quite a lot of damage coming out from Rosty, though, as the Flame Reed Faceless does hit for its 7 to face. The only job it ever wants to do. And then obviously the Argent Horse right finishing up the game.
Rosty just needed to find 1 damage that turn. A lot of cards in his deck that can do just that. And we have a 1/1 series.
Yeah, Rosty was really got a good matchup there. So he's got to be happy with that. He got the good matchup and he won. Because if he would have lost, that's when things start to go a bit wrong. But before we go into the next game, we're going to listen to some insight on Rosty breaking down the different levels of thinking when playing Hearthstone.
If you look at some of the most decorated players in Hearthstone, they all have spreadsheets and countless pages of data. Rosty is exactly in that same boat.
So in Hearthstone, there's 3 main levels of thinking that players can adopt. The first one is the beginner level of thinking. That's your newer players. That's what your basically your average player is going to think at when they make plays. And then there's your advanced player, which means the advanced player, he makes plays that are specifically designed to beat players who are only at beginner level. And then there's expert level, which means when you make your plays, you're trying to beat the advanced player. But you can actually end up losing to the beginner player because you're giving them too much credit and you're playing to beat the advanced player. So the beginner player is going to make plays that you didn't expect and it might end up winning. Okay, so what a lot of players will do when they're trying to justify their play, they'll say, oh, that's just my play style. Well, play styles don't actually exist. There's a play in every situation that'll get you a better result a higher percentage of the time. But we're not computers, so we're not always going to be able to figure that out immediately just because we don't have perfect information. I'm very confident with the lineup I brought this weekend. I feel like I have the best 5 decks out of anybody here. I used to play in a lot of high-level tournaments, so I actually just don't really get nervous anymore, but I'm sure that's not the case for a lot of my opponents.
Big words from Rosty overall, as he's saying he just does not get nervous, and this is the one tournament that I think anyone should be, as there's a lot on the line here. But I think it's something we can all agree on. One of the most impressive things about him is how he discusses the game, and he just instantly comes across a very intelligent player. Yeah,
he definitely has a way of looking at things that is different than certainly the average player. Yeah. And I really like his sort of analysis of the various levels of play that people can be on, because in many cases, people look at a situation and they think, it's kind of amusing that he segued from that into there's the best play. It's like, well, there's actually the best play depending on who you're playing as too, because there's levels of, okay, well, I think that you're thinking that you're thinking.
Sometimes you can go too far down that rabbit hole.
Or whatever,
But we are going into game 3 as these guys are even at 1-1, and it is going to be Rosty's Hunter versus Bradfordlee's Rogue. So again, the Hunter list being a bit more aggressive from Rosty. It might actually work out really well for him in this matchup.
Yeah, this is definitely a matchup where the more aggressive, focused version of Hunter that Rosty's playing can really pay off. He doesn't have any copies of Savannah Highmane, which we've heard a number of players kind of talk about how Highmane against Rogue kind of a huge liability because of the presence of Sap. Rosty's only big cards are Call the Wild, which hits immediately with the Huffer hit. hit, and Stranglethorn Tiger. Those are his only expensive cards, and Stranglethorn Tiger has stealth, so it's going to get a hit in regardless of whether your opponent has sap or not.
Yeah, and also at 5 health, once it gets that hit in, it's actually quite difficult to deal with. The Shadow Strike that's very clean, but otherwise the Rogue has to start, comboing other cards to be able to deal with it effectively. But as you said, it almost always get that 5 damage in, which is very scary when you're against a Hunter that's leaned more towards an aggressive playstyle overall. Or maybe I shouldn't say playstyle when Rosty's playing. There is no... Playstyle's
no such
a lie.
thing. It will be the coin Flame Juggler for Rosty here. Getting in a point. Face Juggler. Only one target there.
Is that the noise it makes?
I think so.
With double prep and backstab in hand, there's a lot to work with going forward from Bradford. There's he just needs some more actual spells to make prep a bit more viable, or a hell of a gadget set turn further down the line.
Yeah, I mean, he has the Azure Drake in hand too, and Azure Drake prep into something is often the kind of turn that can swing games around.
Yeah.
And Rosty with the Direwolf Alpha here. The lone Direwolf Alpha is not something you see all that often on any given board, but it is going to get at least one hit in here.
Yeah, and straight after seeing a backstab, you're going to be pretty confident that it's more than likely going to get a hit in, or your opponent's going to overcommit and actually try and remove it, which is probably a victory in the long run for Rosty. And he does now go into his second Animal Companion, so I imagine we'll be seeing what he's going to roll there first, over trying to quick shot the Thalnos, because he can clear that up with the Direwolf quite easily.
I wouldn't actually be surprised if he just went face, though. There is the with the Huffer.
Wow.
Okay, he's definitely gonna clear off the Blood Mage, I imagine, given the
I think
threat.
that Fan of Knives.
I was gonna say the threat of Fan of Knives is too big. At least force your opponent to attack into Huffer.
Oh, so there's Gadget Zan in hand now for Bradford, and if he
It's
can,
looking okay, and the Eviscerate pickup, that's pretty big as well.
if you can just hold off for a couple of turns, then when you get Gadget Zan with double prep and more relatively cheap spells in hand as well, you can do some pretty crazy things.
I'm going to go ahead and eviscerate the Huffer, attack the Direwolf Alpha. Gets the dagger up once again, and now, Rosty, he's gotten 10 damage in already, which is pretty good, but Bradford's hand is looking pretty scary going into the middle turns of the game.
Yeah, now with the bow drawn, Rosty's going to immediately start counting damage, right? How many hero powers he can weave in every turn. He can potentially bow hero power next turn, go aggressive, then use quick shot later on with maybe the Animal Companion to maybe try and get another Huffer, or Leok to buff the minion. So already he'll be counting damage per turn to work out how many turns he can actually kill Bradfordlee in. But we see a prep sap the turn before he can play Gadget Zan. So that is Bradford playing very, very safe.
Yeah, and amusingly, Bradford knows, because the deck lists are public, that Infested Wolf is his best sap target in the deck. The 4-drop is really the biggest thing that he can really hope to actually hit, given the Tigers are stealth. And there's literally that one Infested Wolf that isn't something that it costs 2 or 3 mana or just has charge.
Yeah, really interesting that he committed to the play before the Gadget Zan turn. He does have another prep as well, but there might not potentially be a great target for Shadow Strike. He might not draw into another spell he can combo with that well. So a little bit scary, but just signifying that he doesn't want to take any more damage than needed. And that's the second Huffer of this game, playing a more aggressive Hunter. So Rosty's going to be feeling pretty good about that.
And here he's deep in thought, okay, can I afford to just go face here? Do I need to kill this Azure Drake for fear of a possible Fan of Knives on my board of nothing but 2 health minions? It's also just... The Rogue, when it gets into a position where it gets ahead, is really good at staying ahead because of the tempo cards like Sap or SI, Backstab, things like that. So while you can push for a little bit of damage, it might just give your opponent the window, as Rosty evaluates here, that will keep you from ever really being able to get a good foothold in the game.
Yeah, I think it was a really tough call, though, because he does have a lot of damage in hand, and he's only a few turns away from Call the Wild to potentially finish it with that burst from Huffer later on. So we are going to see Bradford go into Gadget Zan prep, Shadow Strike. He draws Tomb Pillager and a Conceal, but no
Does not quite have... Oh, and the damage goes on Auctioneer, which is huge because of that Eaglehorn bow. Rosty can actually just use bow or quick shot. He can actually wolf plus quick shot to kill this this Gadget Zan, which I think is very likely that we'll see.
Yeah, it's looking pretty clean. I think it puts the most pressure on, even though you'd like to get the bow on board, hit, and then stack up for next turn. But that's probably going to happen anyway. He's probably going to get both charges of bow off regardless. So in this instance, getting the wolf down is worth more to him.
All right, well, Bradford finds another Auctioneer off the top of his deck here with Conceal in hand. So while he is in a reasonable position here. He's still under a lot of pressure from the Hunter, getting close to the Call of the Wild turn.
Yeah, I think this is definitely the best play. This is not a risky turn, but a turn where you just sort of say to your opponent, okay, go again. But you go, and if you don't put me in, like, effectively lethal range, I have gadgets then. And a whole turn's worth of mana.
Yeah, gadgets and Auctioneer this late in the game. Even scarier than Call of the Wild.
Yeah. Some really, really crazy things can happen. And we're going to see if Bradford's going to be able to pull it off, but it's not looking too great at the moment. He can play the Pirate, which can charge, and that'll proc his Cold Blood, and he can start stacking on that. But he might even start with Trade and then Fan of Knives. But the problem with the Fan is that the Fan might actually have the 1 damage from the bat kill the gadget down, which means that the cycle's going to stop pretty quick. Yeah.
Definitely a difficult turn for Bradfordlee here. It's also important to note that, you know, while he does have Auctioneer, he's not really in a position where he can just set up for a big lethal turn. Because Rosty's still at 29. Bradford had to use a lot of his resources early on to stabilize. He only has a couple of spells here, so he needs to figure out what he can string together, how best to actually utilize the resources he has available.
Yep, so we're there. Oh, he's going to take.
So this is a careful play here, trying to avoid the Auctioneer dying. It does leave him in a position where he's more potentially vulnerable to just getting himself killed. Ooh.
Oh, that's just game.
Oh, and that's, and we see Bradfordlee sort of shaking his head. He knows that damage going face from the Toad, or the Firebat rather, ends up just representing lethal.
Yeah, even with the quick shot as well. But the idea here from Bradford, that might have not looked like the best play, but the idea was, I'm on 9. If the bat misses, if you call the Wild, then there's only 8 damage you can do. So then next turn, I'm going to win somehow. Like that's the plan, but it didn't quite pay off for him that time.
And he really was trying to put himself in a position where he could actually set up 2-turn lethal too, because if he didn't actually have the ability to kill his opponent the next turn, he was going to die to Call the Wild into some sort of damage anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely a rough one there. But before we go into the next match, to find out who's going to win this game, we are going to just check out Bradfordlee talk about his Hearthstone podcast and streaming career.
About this time last year, I joined a group called the Death Rattle Crew podcast after coaching someone to Legend, and that was a co-host on the show. And basically he said, hey, I really liked what you did when you coached me. And so we joined in the Death Rattle Crew podcast. And then since then, history has been made, and I'm now an active member of the Death Rattle Crew podcast. We banter back and forth at the start, and we spend our time breaking down the meta and where it falls for that week, and kind of what we feel like is the future for the meta as we move forward. I try to focus myself as a free-to-play player, and my stream is that way, so that people who don't have a lot of resources available to them can know that they can still play Hearthstone, be competitive, and be successful in the game even though they don't spend a lot of money. Recently, I actually just left my job to start pursuing streaming full-time. Before, I've used it as more of a hobby, and now I want to try and move it more towards a career standpoint because I thoroughly enjoy streaming. It's really fun. And that's really what I want to get out of something that I'm doing in life. And I really think I can benefit the community and benefit other Hearthstone players by doing something like this.
So see Bradfordlee there fully committing to Hearthstone. He's trying to save the world and play Hearthstone at the same time. So that's a pretty big task, but he's doing pretty well with his streaming, his podcast, and doing pretty well getting so far in this tournament.
I actually think I saw someone wearing a Death Rattle Crew t-shirt once at like the gym when I was at some event.
Nice.
I think it might have been BlizzCon, and now I know where it comes from.
Yeah, now you know.
Now I know.
Are you going to tune into the podcast?
I don't know when they broadcast.
We can find
I suppose
out.
it's a podcast. You don't have to listen to it live.
Yeah, that's true.
That's kind of the whole idea
We'll
of
definitely
cast things.
find out. But for this, we are going into the 4th game. Bradfordlee's on his rogue again. So we're going to see. We've seen him have a rough time. He's had 2 pretty rough matchups. And now I bet he's just hoping. It's like, come on. He needs to win with this rogue, so he's just going to stick with it until he wins and then move on with the rest of his decks. Because he could leave it till last, but I think Bradfordlee's one of the players where it's like, I'm just going to keep queuing, get this win, because if I don't take it, I'm not going to go through anyway.
I think the big thing for this rogue deck here, looking at Rosty's lineup, he has one with his Hunter and his Shaman. The remaining decks he has, since his Warrior was banned, which I'm very sad about, Dragon Warrior getting banned, by the way.
Of course.
I think this Zoo deck is actually Bradfordlee's best chance remaining because he's going to struggle a lot to beat the Freeze Mage of Rosty that also remains.
Yeah, this is one of the probably rare occurrences when even in a best of 7 lineup, there's actually a lineup that sort of hard counters you overall with that rogue being pretty weak. Like the whole list actually target rogue pretty hard.
Yeah, Rosty's lineup is very, very good in general against rogue, and Bradfordlee certainly can't be happy to kind of be in this position with his rogue deck, needing to find a win against a lot of very hostile decks.
Yeah, but he seems to be pretty good at getting the coin as the rogue player, so that's going to be at least a bonus. He does have backstab coin, even Thanos to maybe kill some of the 3 health minions off, or at least help just cycle through anyway. But we do see the flame imp come down from Rosty, and overall a pretty good opening hand from the Warlock player here.
Yeah, we saw Rosty kind of debating there exactly what he wanted to do with his turn 1. Playing the Flame Imp is obviously the most aggressive play, but it does leave him vulnerable to backstab, which Bradfordlee has. Rosty going to follow it up, I imagine, with probably the 2-1s. I guess I could just see him playing Peddler here, though. But because the opponent does have coin, that leaves the possibility of coin into SI, which the single 2-drop is more vulnerable to. So the pair of 1s here is a more stable play.
Yeah, and SI doesn't truly deal with either of these minions as well. And next turn, he can go Peddler into the 1-drop he pulls as well. So, yeah, this is just the more sensible play based on the knowledge he has of Bradford having the coin.
Bradford now, not a ton of super exciting plays here. I mean, he could dagger up coin deadly, but that's going to leave him with very, very little to really do next turn.
Yeah,
and
and
he
also
probably wants to hold the coin for the Pillager the following turn.
Yeah, and also you deadly poison into a Void Walker. It's
Right,
not really the most threatening minion in the world. But yeah, it's a tough one. He could just dagger up, pass, if he really wants, just play the Thanos to cycle. I wouldn't mind either of those, but if he needs to do something, looks like he's going to be quite reliant on coining out the Tomb Pillager next turn and seeing what work that can do.
I think getting your dagger set up is pretty valuable against Zoo in particular, just because there are so many instances where doing incremental damage can be very valuable to help clear their board. Yeah, and that's exactly what Bradford does. No attack this turn with the dagger, though he's still sitting roping here. Interestingly, this can potentially give Rosty some amount of information because, he may have coin, and well, he obviously has coin.
He may have the coin.
He may have the coin. He's leaking some information, but that he may have deadly poison specifically.
Yeah, because there had to be something he was pondering, right? Because you wouldn't, if you had literally no other play, you would have just daggered regardless. But we do see Rosty drop down the Peddler, and a couple of options. Now this is really interesting. He has Soulfire, Power Overwhelming in hand. He could get into the Soulfire, but suddenly things start getting a bit risky.
Yeah, the second Soulfire is a lot less attractive than the first because you can't obviously empty a hand of other things and then cast your Soulfire. Mortal Coil in a lot of matchups is really great, but against Rogue, you don't really tend to have incremental damage left on the Rogue minions. Usually you're attacking into them with either Power Overwhelming into something or you're just going face. So I actually wouldn't be surprised to see Light Warden just taken as a 1-2, even though it's obviously the weakest card objectively. I think in context, it may be the best option for Rosty right now.
Yeah, he's got to counter that Farseer somehow.
Yeah, and there it is. He takes the Light Warden, so has an opportunity to take 2 powerful class spells, but recognizes in this instance the 1-2 with basically no ability is his better option.
Yeah, it's a really tough one because normally, as you said, Soulfire always feels like the snap pick, especially in this matchup.
Yeah.
But with already Soulfire and Power Overwhelming in hand, it'll be very difficult to actually get off without just discarding them anyway.
I just want to see him get another Peddler and get a Voodoo Doctor and just get in there for 3 with the Light Warden.
Nice, yeah, and then Bradford has to really consider if he draws Farseer whether he plays it. He heals for 3, but takes just more damage back
It's a real consideration.
We are going to see the Coin Tomb Pillager, no surprise. Needs to get something on the board, it's going to start putting some work in.
And Sea Giant here for the draw for Rosty. Not the matchup that's in the deck for. Ooh, Direwolf Alpha. Okay, that he can use Direwolf Alpha or Power Overwhelming to take care of this Tomb Pillager.
Yeah, I kind of like Direwolf Alpha because it puts additional minion on the board, which then helps Sea Giant next turn. Because you can, if you really want, you can place it with the Villager, trade the Villager, and then trade the Light Warden in.
But the Light Warden, you will never get Light Warden value in that way.
It did its job, kid. Come on.
I know. I just want
it would be cool. Oh, it looks like he's going to
go with the PO.
Yeah. Interesting. So he does return the coin back to Bradford. So the investment of the coin earlier on just gets returned, as now he can use the coin on turn 4 if required. But again, his hand just doesn't look too great at all here.
It's interesting how good this Voidwalker is here. You know, a lot of cases, Voidwalker against Rogue in particular is just so effective because it can protect your other minions from that dagger, whether the deadly poison or not. And you know, Bradford been holding back on that deadly, didn't want to invest it just to kill the Voidwalker so far, but I think he's going to pull the trigger this turn.
Yeah, you get to the point where you just have to. You know, the longer you wait and the longer you wait for a great target, well, that Voidwalker's still there, and with the ability that, you know, the Zoolock excels at, which is trading up, it's very difficult to get a minion to stick to the board when Zoo's sort of in control.
Yeah, and just takes out the, you know, investment of effectively 3 mana to kill a 1-drop. Bloodmage Thalnos also comes down. Bradford just looking to cycle this effectively at this point. Ooh, Forbidden Ritual is a nice draw for Rosty here. He can just go ahead, tap. Imp Gang Boss may change things though.
Yeah, I think Imp Gang Boss becomes better now because normally you want to wait for something like Fan of Knives, or exactly Fan of Knives, to clear the board, or some sort of clear from the Rogue, and then you can refill with Forbidden and then build the board from there. So it looked like it was a pretty strong turn beforehand, but getting Imp Gang Boss down, it's like the first sort of quite beefy minion. Because at the moment he's just sort of all in on the Peddler doing some work as a 2-2.
And look at that Light Warden, the second point of health coming up big, surviving the brawl with Bloodmage Thalnos.
Yeah, it's getting some work done. It's still there, and you know, every single point of damage chipping away. If he picked Soulfire, I'm pretty sure that Soulfire would still be in hand at the moment and not really causing Bradfordlee too much issues.
And I really like this play from Bradford, using the sap to bounce the Imp Gang Boss, just delaying Rosty here. He recognizes that with the Gadgetzan Auctioneer in his hand, he's just looking to, you know, draw the game out, get to the position where he can have that big turn, find his Fan of Knives, and really just sort of put the nail in the coffin of Rosty. Doesn't try and hold back and get a great target like a Sea Giant or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. He'll be fully aware there's a Sea Giant in the deck, so why not just sap the Imp Gang Boss, make him pay 3 mana again if he wants to replay it, and clear up a good chunk of the board now. Just leave a 1-1. I'm probably feeling pretty good about the turn overall, considering the position he was in.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rosty here, not necessarily feeling quite as good. Went from having a pretty full board to just a single Shadow Beast. Sea Giant still stranded.
Yeah, the problem as well is there's not really a lot of burst potential in his hand other than Soulfire. So with the Rogue on 19, there's a chance he might just save stuff up, play some minions, and then try and Soulfire to end the game. But I don't know, there's a chance that we might see Soulfire now to kill the 3-3 and then just try and develop the board. Maybe Imp Gang Boss Soulfire.
Yeah, looks like he may just
going for the full Forbidden Ritual.
And this is just, I think, a recognition of I'm in a really bad spot. I have to just hope my opponent doesn't have Fan of Knives. Yeah. And we see that Bradfordlee does not have Fan of Knives. So Rosty able to develop a really big board. He's already seen a sap. So if his opponent doesn't fan this board, it's very likely he'll be able to play Sea Giant next turn. And that will potentially just be the window that he needs to just get enough threat to win the game.
Yeah, it looks like Bradford's all in on Gadgetzan, coin, prep, Fan of Knives.
Well, he doesn't necessarily have to have that fan this turn. Obviously, he'd love to fan and clear the board, but he does have Conceal to protect this Auctioneer. And interestingly, Rosty has a full board, so because of this Conceal, Bradford, very heads-up play, not clearing off a minion, just going face. Now Rosty can't get any more threat in this board. He has 7 minions, and thus, can't play a Sea Giant, can't play a Defender of Argus.
Okay, real talk. Do you Soulfire one of your own minions to play the Sea Giant?
I mean,
because one, if you throw Sea Giant, that's scary. But the problem is just because the board is 7 damage, to be fair, so it'll put your opponent to 11.
But how do you win the game? How do you win the game if you do that? Your opponent has 7 damage on the board. If they have sap, you've thrown away one of your best burst cards in order to just put a Sea Giant down that gets sapped and doesn't get played again. I think he's just going to go ahead and send everything at face and just hope to find more damage to end up closing out the game.
Yeah, with his opponent on 18, you put them straight to 11. That's very, very low, and there's still all the minions on the board. And if Bradfordlee would have had Fan, I'm pretty sure he would have played it. That's got to be the mindset.
But I think this is just going to be lethal, right? There's Eviscerate, double Cold Blood for 12. Yeah, this is definitely lethal after that tap. Bradfordlee, has a little bit of a slow start in this game, but able to find what he needs and close the game out to tie up the series 2-2 against Rosty.
Yeah, we've seen it throughout most of the day today, where these players are just going back and forth with matchups. It's just been really close sets overall as Bradfordlee does get the win finally with his Rogue, and he can move on to some of his other decks going forward.
That's a very key win, as we mentioned. You know, that Warlock deck from Rosty, probably the only matchup remaining in that lineup that the Rogue could really find a win against. The other remaining deck, the Freeze Mage, very, very difficult for him to beat.
Yeah, but before we go into the next game, guys, we actually sat down with Rosty to talk about how he streams to prep for tournaments like this.
I usually stream when I want to practice for either tournaments or just want to get a little better at the game. So I'll stream myself playing ladder a lot. I'm usually going for #1 on stream. When I want to practice with certain decks or against certain classes, it doesn't really make sense to play against players who are only average at the deck or are just, you know, pretty good at the game. So what I like to do, I like to practice with players who are, you know, considered one of the better players of that specific deck. So for example, when I want to like play with Freeze Mage or like practice against Freeze Mage, I'll usually talk to Laughing or Amnesiac because they're generally considered some of the better Freeze Mage players out there. The reason I chose to actually get into Hearthstone is because compared to other companies, Blizzard just treats its players really, really well. They promote their players, unlike other companies. They don't look down upon it. When they were making Whispers of the Old Gods, they had streamers revealing cards. So that helps promote the streamers, but it also helps promote the game itself, which I really liked. I thought that was a great aspect. I also feel like there's a really good balance between the competitive scene and the casual scene. For their competitive scene, Blizzard actually just hosts open tournaments where anybody can enter, and they're worth HCT points. So if you're a casual player but you want to get into the competitive scene, you can just enter one of these and then start. And then eventually, if you get enough of the points, you can enter the spring preliminaries. And then that would be a good start to becoming a competitive player.
See there, Rosty's tactic of if you want to get good at a deck, seek out the best players of that deck and then learn from them. You can't really argue with that.
No, not at all. Not at all. You know, definitely the best way to improve in Hearthstone is to play against people who are better than you.
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
Like you said, you know, you're not gonna learn anything playing against players who are just average, playing against players who are worse than you. You might feel good because you win a lot, but you're not gonna get better.
Yeah, you don't normally learn too much from a win, right? You know, you have to try and pick apart your losses and then develop it from there. And if you've got a specialist of a deck archetype helping you with that, then it's only going to go quicker. But we are going to go into the next game in this series, and it is going to be Bradfordlee versus Rosty. Rosty on the Warlock and Bradford on his Hunter.
And this is a matchup that can be pretty tough for the Hunter these days. The mid-range Hunter typically doesn't necessarily have great tools against Warlock Zoo currently, though we do see the Unleash the Hounds in Bradford's hand. That's actually a card that many versions of Hunter are sometimes cutting or at least playing fewer copies of, simply because the only matchup where it really is great in the current metagame is against Zoo, and Bradford has his Unleash the Hounds in his opening hand.
Yeah, I think as hunters have leaned towards not playing Knife Juggler anymore.
Right.
Like Knife Juggler Unleash was like the swing turn 5 with Hunter versus Zoo, and could normally just just flip the game so hard you can win off the back of that momentum. But that isn't available, and we do look like Bradford is going to keep hold of that Unleash and just have that answer in hand straight away.
Yeah, the problem though is that he doesn't really have any early plays in his hand. He has only 3 drops and a 6 drop so far, so he may very well fall pretty far behind, though Unleash the Hounds is a great card to catch up with.
Yeah, but Rosty now drawing into the Councilman, one of the really powerful cards, one of the new cards from this set. Being able to make him just curve out very easily going into Peddler and Councilman, and when Councilman's played, it really does demand an answer from your opponent, because if it's left just one turn, you can follow up with something like the Forbidden Ritual to then buff its attacks so high that it becomes a huge threat out of nowhere.
Yeah, and Rosty here has the option. I think he may just coin it out this turn. Yeah, he has the ability to play the Councilman, goes ahead and attacks in with his Villager, gets the buff on his Councilman, and where does the bat spit? To the face. Ooh.
Best outcome for Rosty, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rosty does have either Peddler or Ritual he can play next turn to really get the Councilman going.
Yeah, he can actually Ritual and just kill off this grub if it's played.
Yeah.
So that's going to look pretty good. As the main thing you're in fear of a turn 3 from Hunter is they're setting up a beast for Houndmaster turn 4. So even as an aggressive deck, you want to actually just deal with that beast to just say Houndmaster cannot happen this turn.
Yeah. So Bradford here in a pretty tight spot. any of the animal companions, none of the animal companions rather, are terribly good. Leok could just be a disaster if he gets a Leok.
Yeah,
and,
I think any of the two others, though, at least set up for a good Unleash next turn.
It's true.
Because you're more
It's
than
true.
likely guaranteed to be able to kill the Counselor.
Well, Leok actually is also pretty terrible. Misha's the best result.
Yeah.
Misha here is able to give him something that even if Rosty plays, you know, his Peddler into something, he actually has a Flame Imp, which is really good because playing 2 health minions to buff up his Councilman here gives him some resilience against the Unleash the Hound. Oh, but Shield Bearer!
Yeah.
Oh my god, if he takes that Shield Bearer, that is actually huge. It's such incredible protection from Unleash or against a bow or anything like that.
Yeah, and he could still be able to kill the Misha as well.
Oh, he takes the Abusive. Still gonna. I mean, this is still powerful turn. He's still able to play the Flame Imp, but he is now vulnerable to the Unleash killing his Councilman, whereas with Shield Bearer, Unleash would not be able to do so.
Yeah, I think that just fits with Rusty's play style, though.
Funny you should say.
Yeah, because you know he isn't necessarily gonna really like try and play around a 1-up in the deck, right? In this exact position. Normally Abusive is always better than Shield Bearer.
I think it's so good against Bow there too, though.
That's true.
You have
It'll be Bow off
such
turn,
a powerful card to protect there. Regardless, Bradford does clear off nearly the entire board with that Unleash the Hound. So as you're mentioning, a very key card in this matchup. And
Rosty can now actually just go for Juggler and Forbidden Ritual. Get, you know, bank those 2 Juggles to face. Oh, he's going to go for the 4.
Yeah,
okay, so he's setting up for Sea Giant.
Setting up for a big Giant next turn. Going to be Toad and a Carrion Grub for Bradfordlee. And this does give Rosty the ability to just kind of, a second Abusive Sergeant. So you get double Abusive, then Sea Giant. He actually he can't quite Knife Juggler Abusive. There's not enough room in the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I was already looking, I was like,
okay, can
Rosty do this insane turn now? But yeah, what this does as well is because Unleash is gone, it gives Rosty full freedom to do pretty much whatever he wants on the board. And this is going to be really nice as he gets the 1 Juggler there, can play the Sea Giant to try and get the second one, but I guess he attacks first. Oh no, he can't. He needs to, yeah. He can't trade because he would lose the Sea Giant.
Well, he can play the Sea Giant and then attack these in.
Yeah.
Like, he could play Sea Giant and then attack all of his tentacles into the opposing board to clear things off.
Yeah, I feel pretty good. I think what he needs to focus on as well is sort of playing around Deadly Shot as much as he can, because that's Sea Giant is such a huge impactful card that you don't want it to just be the turn swing the other way by just an easy Deadly Shot from your opponent.
Right, so it looks like he just wants to get the face damage in, doesn't want to bother killing off the Carrion Grub here. Does spit out and kill the
It's a pretty good snipe.
So as you mentioned, this gives him the biggest board that he can possibly have to protect his Sea Giant from Deadly Shot. It's really the only way the Hunter can afford to remove the 8/8. So this is a very sort of conservative play to try and ensure that there's no possibility of that happening. Ooh, Leroy. All right, so he's 11 on board.
It's 19, right?
So much damage already.
Yeah, this is going to look very, very scary for Bradford. And this is what we talked about earlier in a previous matchup of Rosty's Hunter, is that sometimes high main is just a bit too slow.
Yeah.
And we saw it there where Bradford played the high main, of course. He didn't really have much else to do. And that's sort of just hope it gets effect next turn. But this is such a strong setup from Rosty. Having Leroy in hand, the Sea Giant completely unanswered. That's a hell of a lot of damage.
Yeah, and he's just sending everything to the face here, putting Bradfordlee down to just 9 life. And, you know, with a huge board of his own, the only Unleash the Hounds is already gone. So there's really no way for Bradford to address this board. He could have found a Houndmaster, maybe absorbed some damage, but with Leroy in the hand, this game's all but over.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, so what Rosty did there was set up a position where even a Houndmaster isn't going to be enough, right? Because he can just Leroy, clear it off, and then go face with the Giant.
Yeah, so Bradford trying to dig deep, but there's just nothing there.
Yeah, just taking his time to just check, you know. There's no point not taking your time on a full turn here, just trying to work out what's possible and what's not.
Yeah, going to go ahead and make his attacks, but in the end, still too much damage on the board. And Rosty is going to take this game and move the series to 3-2.
Yeah, Rosty really good performance there, and we saw the difference in getting that Unleash the Hounds out before Forbidden Ritual. Because then you just refill the board, you know, there's only one Unleash, it's gone early, and then, you know, Rosty can pretty much do whatever he wants there.
Yeah, Rosty was really able to dictate the pace of that game. That's really, I think, shows the power of the Warlock deck in this particular matchup. Many players are bringing this mid-range Hunter deck, which has sort of increased the power in many ways of the Warlock Zoo.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get into the next game, we're just going to have a quick word with Bradfordlee.
My strategy for deck building when it came to this tournament was trying to create something that was 50% across the field as a whole. And additionally, with some caveats, I cut Warlock from my lineup as I felt like it was going to be targeted this weekend.
And that is the story really revolving around Bradfordlee in terms of his lineup. He is the only player who didn't bring Warlock, and even in previous tournaments, previous HCT in the past few weeks, we've seen that almost everyone bringing Zoo. It's such a powerful deck and really difficult to deal with, as we saw from the previous match. But Bradford deciding just not to bring it, and we'll see if it comes back to bite him afterwards.
And he does have his Hunter deck that we just saw him playing, as well as Aggro Shaman remaining, while Rosty has Freeze Mage. These are two matchups that can be pretty tricky for the Freeze Mage. Bradford sticking with his Shaman deck for the first game, certainly the deck that gives him the best chance of winning this matchup.
Yeah, you really just want to get as many points on the board. Can put yourself in a good position after a win, as opposed to trying to come back from a loss. So Bradfordlee is going to play Shaman, and as you said, it's kind of difficult because in this matchup specifically, if the Freeze Mage just doesn't quite draw defensive enough, they just won't be able to catch up in terms of damage.
And yeah, the key for the Shaman is to really get in significant early damage with minions, and then eventually transition into Doomhammer Burn. Because the Freeze Mage is really well equipped to deal with a board full of minions in the mid game. It has cards like Blizzard, Frost Nova, able to contain and slow the game down until it can get to the point where it burns you out. Not quite as well equipped to deal with just getting smashed in the face repeatedly with Doomhammer.
Exactly, and I feel like it only takes, if the Shaman's able to start off really quickly with minion heavy, as you said, it only takes like one turn of the Freeze Mage not having a way to freeze or deal with the board, and then suddenly they've just already took too much damage too early. And Doomsayer, though, definitely a good card. Definitely going to help in this matchup.
Yeah, Doomsayer helps slow down the game to the point that the Freeze Mage can really try to stabilize. One of the key things that the Freeze Mage always needs is card draw, though, and Rosty has none of it right now.
Yeah, and he's got like, you know, some defensive plays. He's got two of the secrets, the Doomsayer in forms of defense, and then Frostbolt Ice Lance. Not really what you want at the moment. Frostbolt's nice to deal with early minions, but just as he said, it's all more about cycle early on, especially when your opponent doesn't come out with a super aggressive start, and you can slow them down with Doomsayer, as we can see now. You really want to follow up with cycle.
Yeah, we saw Rosty take a little bit of time before playing this Doomsayer on turn 2. One of the issues with Doomsayer against Shaman is that you really want it to absorb the early minion damage, because once you get sort of past the first couple turns, your opponent can have cards like Flame Tongue or just burn spells that can increase their ability to clear it off the board, and you can't really afford to just take those early hits like you can against decks that have fewer ways to finish you off.
Yeah, the difference between a turn 2 Doomsayer and a turn 3 with like no freeze effects is actually pretty huge.
It really is.
Because that changes everything. Like suddenly it's just way easier for the Shaman to kill it off, and Bradfordlee's just taking his time here, working out exactly what he wants to do. Is he actually going to kill the Doomsayer?
Really?
To guard a 1/1.
What?
That's 6.
This is
6 damage from hand to guard a 1/1. He could
Wow.
have actually just totemed up, because he does play things from below. So he could have just cashed in that totem and just reduced the cost going forward.
That is a serious investment to protect his minions here. It does allow him to develop the Sir Finley.
He's gone for the armor.
Okay, so Bradford looking to take a fairly unusual approach to this matchup. Typically, the Shaman generally just wants to push for as much damage as possible, and they can use the hero power to find things like, or rather the discover of Sir Finley for the hero power to find things like Steady Shot. But Bradford, we didn't really see what options he had, but choosing to just...
He picked this pretty quick.
He did, he really did.
Yeah.
He's choosing to kind of extend the game out here with the armor up, which can make it very difficult for the Freeze Mage to assemble enough damage, because the Freeze Mage needs to not only defend themselves against your damage, but also assemble enough damage to actually kill you, which obviously we've seen is very difficult against warriors in general, and can be even more difficult when you have to expend resources just staying alive.
Yeah, you got to see the abusive there onto Finley, and just continue to push for more damage. He probably won't kill off the Loot Hoarder, as he's just let his opponent trade. There's no reason not to at this point. Alexstrasza does come in time for Rosty, but that's a few turns too early. Even the second Ice Lance, this is not what he's looking for at the moment.
I actually am a little surprised that Bradford chose to attack face with the 1/1 rather than kill the Loot Hoarder, because it did mean that he lost a 2-power minion to the ping rather than just the Divine Shield of his 1-power minion.
Yeah, I think just because it's it wants a Divine Shield on as long as possible because it makes it much less susceptible to AoE.
It's true.
And the damage on the Squire will sort of add up over time because of the Divine Shield and catch up the damage of the Wolf, I guess.
Well, here, I mean, Bradford is all in. This is his entire hand on the board, and Rosty,
I would have loved to have seen the other hero powers because he's been so aggressive.
Yeah.
Whilst taking the warrior hero power is kind of interesting.
It really is quite the study in opposites, as we see the Frost Nova from Rosty slows down the board a little bit, and he's just going to use his Ice Lances as removal. Rosty now just trying to get to the stage where he can try and win the game as a mage control deck. You know, given that Bradford has chosen Armor Up as his hero power and has exhausted so many of his resources being so aggressive and clearing off that early Doomsayer, just the 8/8 body of Alexstrasza could very well be enough to just take over this game.
Yeah, and really interesting as well, Rosty actually drew last there when he didn't particularly need the spell power to clear off those minions, so interesting one. He did draw into second Ice Block, so he can extend the game multiple turns and get himself to the Alexstrasza turn. That's almost a given at this point. Second Feral Spirit coming out from Bradford. I imagine he's going to play them with this much mana and only one card in hand. Seems good.
Yeah, I mean, Bradford's just he's drawing and playing. That's the point of the game that he's at. And Rosty is at the, I'm going to try and stay alive and kill you with this giant dragon. Mirror Image, an interesting inclusion in Rosty's deck. We actually saw Crane playing this a couple of weeks ago at the Europe Spring Championship. Chooses not to play it this turn, wants to get the max value he can out of his Ice Block plus Alexstrasza combination.
Yeah. Do you even think there's a chance he might be setting up for a turn 10 Alex? So you can Alex and then Mirror Image?
It's possible,
use his second Ice Block, although it never feels great to use your second Ice Block when you're guaranteed it's going to be procced. This Blizzard is huge though.
Wow.
This buys him a turn, so now he can do it. He's putting the Mirror Image down now, so the Ice Block is very unlikely to get procced this turn. He can Alexstrasza and then go from there, and there's actually not a lot of power on the board when all the minions are at 1 health.
Tuskar Totemic, this could be Healing Totem, could be pretty big. Flame Tongue, also a pretty powerful hit there. Frostbolt, though, that is an answer to that Flame Tongue, and now, you know, Rosty, he still has this Ice Block set up. He's just using this time to grind out Bradford's resources, and, you know, just eventually setting up this huge Alexstrasza. Rockbiter does nothing here. I mean, he can break the Ice Block, but you know, how valuable is that at this point? I
think he has to, though. Yeah. He has to go for it.
It breaks it at 6, though?
Yeah.
We see Bradford shaking his head.
So Bradford could have just rock-bited himself and broke it 3, which is what you realized instantly. And I think because he's been playing just one card off the top, one card, he should be playing too fast.
Yeah.
He should just slow down
he's
and actually think about what's going on.
And that now, it can actually just be barrier block here, or just block and then barrier after the Alexstrasza.
Yeah. I mean, Rosty can take multiple routes here.
Yeah. He
doesn't particularly need to Ice Barrier, but he is thinking about it because it's an efficient use of his mana, right?
The thing about using the Ice Barrier before or after Alexstrasza, using it after Alexstrasza represents more life gain from Alexstrasza if he chooses to use it in the following turn. Yeah. And here, Bradford, you know, he's just plinking away here, not even able to break the block this turn. Now, the Novice Engineer represents removal in one of these minions, and we're going to see the full Alexstrasza from 1 to 15.
And not being able to break the block is huge. And that would have changed if he'd played the Rockbiter separately from the minions. So Bradford really getting punished for just playing a little bit too quickly and just not focusing for a split second, and then that's what can happen here as he plays the Trog. Starts to build up his board, but we can see there's already block. There's going to be Nova.
Oh,
never mind, there's going to be Blizzard. Why not?
Oh dear, Blizzard comes down, wipes nearly Bradford's entire board off. Rosty, you know, down to 8 here, but has that Ice Barrier still in his hand, and of course the Ice Block still remaining. Bradford's gained a lot of armor here.
Yeah, he can chip away. Arcane Intellect is huge. It means Rosty can draw and start to draw into those really important cards. He does get the Fireball and the Emperor, not the super key cards he needs at the moment, but it's definitely all helps. And now Rosty's going to make a decision on whether he needs to go aggressive or not, and he is. He is not going to run 8 damage into either of these minions. He's just going to go really aggressive, ping off the shield to make sure that if there's a trade into Alexstrasza, the Argent Horse Rider does die. But this is still, I think this is still pretty close. Like even a Doomhammer could change everything here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a situation where Rosty recognizes he's in a race against time. He needs to actually win the game before Bradford is able to dig and find his burn spells, because he's just at 6 life. There's Pyroblast.
That's some damage.
Speaking of things that win races against time, I would not be surprised to see Rosty just Frost Nova here to protect his Alexstrasza.
Yeah, pay 3 mana, deal 8 damage.
Yeah, he has 13 on the board. He has the Pyroblast in hand. He nearly has 2-turn lethal.
Yeah, Duskgato Totem is going to come down. This could be pretty key. A Taunt Totem would actually be pretty useful here. It's going to be healing though,
Totem does not do it.
Bradford with face
in his hands. I think this may just be game over, because Rosty is able to send these 2 minions to the face. He has Fireball and Pyroblast. I don't see any way out of this for Bradfordlee.
There's Ice Barrier and Ice Block left. There's nothing, and Bradford really suffering from the Rockbiter misplay early on and the lack of Doomhammer, as that's one of the key cards in this matchup overall.
Yeah, Bradford took a very unusual line to this, played like kind of a super aggressive style early, and, along with the defensive style of the armor up pick, and you know he hasn't been able to keep himself alive against this dragon. And he hasn't been able to actually finish the game through the secrets from the Freeze Mage, so not really working out. And Rosty, he has the Pyroblast.
Yeah, I mean, he can just Pyroblast now, and that's going to be the game, as Rosty takes the Freeze Mage versus the Aggro Shaman. And he is the last player of the day to go through to top 4 tomorrow.
Yeah, so definitely very well played by Rosty there. You know, certainly a deserving competitor moving on to the semifinals.
Yeah, you could see the sort of meticulous play that I think we all expected of him, just from hearing him speak about the game. You know, very focused player. And we see there your semifinals of tomorrow, and all the games we're going to have. We're going to have Sidonia versus Napoleon and Joster versus Rosty. So yeah, that's a really crazy game overall, and Frodan is with the winner, who's Rosty, with a quick interview.
Congratulations on your victory, Rosty. You're going to move on to day 2 to challenge for a chance at the title. That was a pretty back-and-forth series. Just talk to me about some things that stuck out in your mind and some of the keys to victory to let you get that win.
So with Conquest, queuing is really, really important. And then I got really fortunate because I was hoping he wouldn't queue his Aggro Shaman first, because Aggro Shaman was going to pick up a win against my lineup no matter what happened. So I was really lucky that he decided to queue it last and just kind of gave me Rogue early on. So that gave all my decks an extra chance to win if I had needed it. Rather than if he had queued Rogue last, then that would give me the lowest chance of winning, since if he steals a win, he had already won with his other decks. So queuing is really important. I got pretty fortunate with it.
All right. Great plays up until the point where you just called it Shaman. I think we have a custom here. It's Shaman. Otherwise, we're about to put you on a plane back with Raven to the UK. Why do you call it It's Shaman.
It's Shaman, though.
It's Shaman. And I want to go...
Shaman, though.
I want to go to a board of experts over the sidebar as we break down the post-game report to talk about that series, but more importantly, to find out how you pronounce this class in Hearthstone.
Poor choice, Dan, because joining me on the bar for the post-match wrap-up is going to be Raven. And, of course, Cora on the end. It was a fun day, guys. We had a lot of interesting matches, a lot of fun decks. Americas is my favorite region for a reason, because we don't see very many control decks, but... yeah, that last match, Rosty taking a win 4-2 over Bradfordlee that we just saw. So a couple of people are still correct on the interview boards. I believe Rosty was chosen, Sidonia was chosen, so at least a couple of the casters were right. But let's take a look one last time at the updated playoff bracket that we're going to be seeing tomorrow. First semifinal, Sidonia versus Napoleon, and then Joster versus Rosty. Cora, I'm going to come to you first. Any surprises here? Any matches that stood out to you? Any players that stood out to you at the end of day 1?
Absolutely. I think that first match, everybody was sort of assuming that Dear Jason would put up a great showing, considering he's been at this stage before. He was nearly in the World Championships in 2014. So to fall in the quarterfinals was a little bit surprising, but Sidonia played incredibly well. And I think in this case, the deserving player went through. So congratulations to Sidonia. And the other players we didn't know too much about, but I think we have a really well-rounded top 4.
Yeah, I agree. And as we take a look at tomorrow's schedule, Raven, anything stood out for you today? Any particular classes that we saw today that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the Hunter felt like it had a lot of mixed results.
Not Shaman?
I don't know what that class is, TJ. I'm really confused every time you say that word.
Correct answer.
But yeah, Hunter really stood out as, like, you know, obviously one of the decks almost everyone brought, and it had some very mixed results overall. But I think both semifinals look really good tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're going to have a champion at the end of the day tomorrow, as you saw there, grand final. So definitely something to be tuned in for. Let's start the recap of the day. We're going to start off with quarterfinal match number 1, which was Sidonia versus Dear Jason. Both these guys had very similar deck lineups. Maybe the difference being the Druid there, where Dear Jason had the Yogg Druid. This was a very close series. Cora, why don't you break it down a little bit for me here? How did this match go overall?
Absolutely. So it was a bit of a back and forth for both guys.
Game 7, yeah.
And yeah, Game 7, like you said, it came down to Dear Jason's his Yogg Druid. Unfortunately, we did not get to see that Yogg, and it seemed like he had a bit of a runaway start with Fandral Staghelm, innervated out on turn 2, follow up with the Feral Rage off the top. Unfortunately, tapered out a little bit in the late game, wasn't able to pull that game together, and no Yogg as a finisher, which I'm sure we were all a little bit disappointed about, but it just went Sidonia's way.
I mean, the game got to the point where, like, it looked so good for the Druid, and then it just ran out of juice very quickly, and there was just no recovery. You really needed that Yogg, like you said, to just have the whole comeback mechanic there.
Yeah, I was talking to Dear Jason. He said that the Yogg deck in practice was one of the decks that would win him games the majority of the time when he got into a position where he was like behind, or when he got into a position where it was like down to game 7. So didn't work out for him this time, but it was close. It was definitely close. We actually have a clip. This one is of Dear Jason. This was a really interesting move here, and I don't think many people spotted it, but you see him here on turn 4. He's mousing over his own Leok with his kill command. And now what this does is he's trying to bluff to Sidonia the fact that he has Houndmaster in his hand. Because, you know, turn 4, Houndmaster's a card that you would suspect. So he mouse over the kill command, but eventually goes with the Eaglehorn Bow. Is bluffing like this, does this have a place? Do you think this might have thrown Sidonia off a little bit?
Yeah, I think with potentially less experienced players, it might have. But one of the things that I've actually talked to a lot of players about this, and their response is actually, you don't care what they're doing with their mouse. You don't look at anything if they're hovering over cards. You play the turn as if you would play it anyway. If you want to play around Houndmaster, you think they've got it fine. If you don't, you just carry on. You make the best play on your turn. And any form of excessive card hovering or stuff like that, you just ignore, because that's kind of a nod to the player's mentality themselves. So maybe they give too much of themselves away by doing plays like that.
Yeah, and we're going to see what Sidonia has to say about it. Sidonia did end up winning that match anyway, so we'll throw it over to Dan, who's standing by with Sidonia for some words on his victory.
Congratulations again on your win, Sidonia. The casters actually just brought it up over at the sidebar. Having a kill command target just as a way to distract you. Do you pay attention to stuff like that at all?
Well, he made it pretty obvious in the game, so I thought he was going to unmaster it, but when he didn't, I thought either he was misplaying because the play he did was way worse than unmaster, so made it pretty obvious that it was either bad or he didn't have it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think me and TJ were debating in the back, and I was saying, like, if he has Houndmaster, he absolutely would play it. So in fact, because he did that and he played the Eaglehorn Bow, it gives you another signal that it's actually a spell that you can target something else, you know, like a quick shot or a kill command. So I felt like he gave you actual more information and hurt himself, assuming you read into that, because you can target stuff. That's just me. We have actually a couple clips that we want to break down through the series. One of them actually is involving a kill command, but it was in the Druid game specifically. So why don't you walk us through some of your thought process here?
Yeah, so basically I tested this matchup a lot because it's one of the decks I haven't faced very much on ladder, and it's different than the Druid decks I usually play. And I noticed that it's pretty impossible to win if your opponent sticks a Fandral, since pretty much all of his cards combo with it, like way more than in the other Druid lists. So I knew that I pretty much have to kill it, and if you look at my hand, you see that I have like a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and like a 6-drop, I think, so I could kill it and still curve perfectly afterwards. So I didn't think there was any reason not to kill it, and gave me the best chance to win, since it's so unlikely to win if I leave it there.
Yeah, it's kind of like got that Emperor Thor Sand effect, where it's like, I just can't leave this up, otherwise I could just lose the game because I just let this one legendary minion stay on the board. It's too strong.
Yeah, I feel like in the past Hunter decks you felt like you needed like 5 damage face with kill command, or more value than just a ping, But in this case, this hunter deck has so much value with like double call, double eye main, double tiger. You just want to survive until then.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good assessment. Let's take a look at that second clip, specifically, I believe, with the Shaman game as well. You were on the board with an Argent Squire, and you had a couple of ways you could play this turn, too. Why don't you walk me through the thought process of why you ended up going with the Rockbiter here?
Yeah, basically this turn I was trying to, because usually you want to Doomhammer on 5 when you play Shaman, so, but if you Doomhammer on 5 and don't have a board, it's really bad. You want to like establish a board and then Doomhammer to kind of snowball it. If you just Doomhammer, he's going to play stuff, you clear every turn and never get to have a board. So that's why I did this play basically, because I wanted to really establish a board that was going to stick. Because it was possible to play like Totem Golem or something that was stronger immediately, but then you could have like Feral Spirit or anything that will like stick on the board, and then I couldn't even play my Doomhammer anymore, so that would give me like more options in the following turns.
Cool, cool. Makes sense. How do you feel about your opponent tomorrow, Napoleon, that you're going to go up in the first match of the semifinals?
Yeah, I've seen him play. I think he's very good. He looks like he has a really almost like mathematical approach. He really thinks he's really like counting how much damage he has, how much life.
Can you handle his intensity? He's pretty emotional.
Yeah, he's pretty intense. Like I think how I play is more of a general. Like I have a game plan. I'm trying to figure out like what are my outs, what's the way I win this game, and try to figure out the general game plan. But like I made some technical mistakes sometime. I think he's very focused on technical play, but maybe I can trip him up on his game plan, or maybe he's not going to adjust as well.
Okay. Well, you have an entire night to prepare, so good luck. Congratulations again on the semifinal berth. That's it for now until we come back to the desk. Let's go back to DJ and the crew and wrap up more of the series that happened today.
Thanks, Dan. Always great to hear thoughts from the players directly about the lines of play and their thoughts moving forward. So he'll be playing in the first semifinal tomorrow against Napoleon. That'll take place at the beginning of the day. But let's move on to the next match, quarterfinal match number 2 that we saw today. Dwayne versus Napoleon. This is one of the quicker matchups of the day. Napoleon actually took this one 4-1, and it looked like it was going to be a sweep. Napoleon coming into today, a lot of people thought he was, like Sidonia said, the most technically skilled player coming in because of his play in the preliminaries. Cora, do you think he showed that today? And do you think he has a good chance of making a run for the grand finals?
I absolutely do. And what we were saying about Napoleon before was he came in so confident that his technical play would be flawless, as he said. And in the past, we've had players who've been very confident, who have touted their technical play as being perfect, and it's been anything but. So with Napoleon here, I was very pleasantly surprised that he actually lived up to the hype. His own self-confidence really showed through, and he did play exceedingly well, taking that match very quickly.
Yeah, and I think as well as the game went on, you could see visibly he was like way more relaxed. He got a win under his belt straight away. It was like, right, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this. Confidence really kicked in, and like you said, he put his money where his mouth was, and he did it. So.
Yeah, and we were talking to him a little bit after the match. We sat down with him and asked him a few questions about how he thought, and he said he was unhappy with his freeze mage play, most notably in the last game. So we actually have a clip. Let's take a look. It's a play where it was getting late into the game. Napoleon was starting to get to the point where he was under a lot of pressure, where he was only a few turns away from dying, and he had a few choices here of what to go for, and ultimately decided to go for Frostbolt Ice Lance as opposed to Fireball or Roaring Torch to try and set up and out for a 2-turn lethal. Now, Cora, he did draw the Ice Lance going into the next turn, so he was punished a little bit for this. But was that a big deal? Do you think he should be unhappy about this play, or do you think that this is the right call given the circumstances?
It would have been a much bigger deal had Dwayne chosen to actually clear that Blood Mage Thalnos the following turn, which he decided to leave up, giving his opponent the damage he needed to actually win. So Napoleon, while he may not have been too happy about that play, I think it really worked out well for him, and that is a small mistake in the grand scheme of things. So definitely should be feeling more confident going into tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it was a difficult call as well because with the Thalnos down and playing Frostbolt Ice Lance, you actually gain like 2 additional damage to the spell power versus just playing one spell. So I think that's what was in his, the forefront of his mind. It's like, okay, while Thanos is alive, I'm going to get +2 damage instead of +1, and that'll just help towards going forward.
Yeah.
But when you draw Ice Lance afterwards, it's very easy to say, oh, I should have kept it. But it's a really difficult call to make, especially in a game in this series.
Yeah, he had about, I think, like 13 cards left at that point, so it was very unlikely that he did draw the second one. It just happened that the one card he didn't want to see was the card that maybe forced him to think that he didn't play it the correct way. But did end up winning. And we were talking to Napoleon again. He said that he really wants to play Rosty in the grand finals because he wants to play the other player in the tournament that has Freeze Mage, because he wants to show, I think, that he's the better Freeze Mage player at the end of the day. And we were also talking to him, and he said that he's going to prepare with one of his friends, one of his practice partners. And he's going to have his friend play Sidonia's deck list in a practice best of 7, and he's going to play his own to try and simulate that matchup. Do you think this is sort of the right strategy to go about simulating that matchup, Raven?
Yeah, 100%. If you're aware of the deck lists in any tournament and you have them beforehand and you have any time to practice against an opponent you know you're going to run into, you play against the exact same deck list to just try and, as many times as you can actually, to just try and bring out every single scenario that can come up, so then you know how to deal with it. And the fact that you're playing with it against a practice partner means they can give feedback on your, on the other side of that as well. So I think it's really important. And if Napoleon does that, I think he's going to have a pretty good advantage tomorrow.
Can you over-prepare, Cora? Is this something that plays into your mind? Can you get into a point where you play the matchup too many times where you're starting to expect things that may not be things that you could totally play around?
I think certainly fatigue can come into it. Over-preparing is definitely something to worry about, but I would think not quite as much. In this case, I would be a little bit more concerned about whether or not the practice partner and Sidonia will play in a similar fashion, because although you're playing the same decks, you're playing the same lists, playstyle can be very different, and it can really vary in the intention of the opponent. So while you're getting the closest to possible practice that you can get, the most authentic practice, there's no guarantees that it will be exactly similar to how Sidonia will actually be playing tomorrow.
All right, well, that'll be the first semifinal of the day. That'll be Sidonia versus Napoleon. So make sure you guys tune in right at the beginning. That's going to be a really good one. But let's move on to the recap of quarterfinal number 3 that we saw today. Was Joster versus PNC. Another match that went all 7 games. Raven, these guys came in with very similar lineups, but Joster pulled it out with the Reno Warlock, a deck that a lot of people thought wasn't going to be strong. Joster himself touted it as a high-risk, high-reward deck. What do you think of the deck after seeing it perform in Americas?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to judge, as like everyone, or at least most players, are on the bandwagon of Zoo is just stronger overall. But the difference between bringing deck lists to a tournament where everyone's available, you can't build a lineup to beat a deck that you don't think anyone's going to bring. So then suddenly you get the advantage of Reno Lock not being something anyone's prepared for, even though they know it's coming in terms of going into the match itself. You don't build your lineup to build it to beat it. So I think that's worked in his favor for this game at least. We'll see how it performs tomorrow.
Yeah, and Cora, we saw on the screen there for a moment the Camel Hunter, which is a deck that a lot of people were thinking that's another deck that maybe you shouldn't bring because of so many decks now, like Zoo Warlock and Shaman, having strong 1-drops that might punish you for playing that card. But he, again, a deck that worked out for him. Do you think that deck plus the Reno deck can make a far run in this tournament?
If he has the luck that he had today, absolutely. He actually ended up playing Desert Camel, pulling out the injured Kvaldir, which was a 1-in-3. He had 2 Fiery Bats in deck, and it worked out for him, as well as in the Reno Jackson game. Having Reno Jackson against a Dragon Warrior that has you at potential lethal on turn 4 was just the absolute card he needed at that point. So, yes, the Reno Lock was certainly high risk, high reward today and was a huge, huge success for him. Hopefully we'll be seeing the same thing tomorrow, but it's tough to say.
Yeah, it's a really bold call, and I have to commend Joster for making the choice to bring those decks when he was against a lot of adversity when people were talking about those 2 decks in the lineup. But let's hear from Joster himself. We'll send it over to Frodan to talk with him after his win.
Joster, congratulations on making the semifinals for day number 2's competition. Going up in PNC and looking at some of those highlights there, I mean, what in your mind stuck out the most in that series?
I didn't really come into it thinking that I was going to win. I really thought I was unfavored. And, coming out and getting a win in my first game with Camel Hunter and first game with the Reno Lock, it was really stuck out to me.
Yeah, that Reno Lock game was on thin ice. I mean, a couple of small decisions like killing Sun Fury Protector or, I mean, I don't know if the Shadow Bolt really seal the game. He didn't have the core counter late, but it was nice to have for sure. But I mean, Reno Lock, people criticize the deck choice. Do you feel a little bit of regret bringing it?
No, I think it was probably a good choice. It's a deck that it can do really bad one week and do amazing the next week. And if it's built correctly, I think it can win any matchup.
Well, you know, Europe champion for spring, Tice, stands by Reno Lock, and he said he loved bringing deck. He thought it was one of the keys to his victory. So maybe it's a premonition. You're the only guy who brought Reno Lock. Let's take a look at some of the plays, specifically this one where you had to just kind of go like all in. Or, you know, it depends on how you view it. Can you just walk through some of the plays here and why you chose to go for this line specifically?
Right. I was really behind in the Rogue Mirror, so I knew that if I was going to win, I had to go all in all at once. So I had to play my SI7 agent and conceal on the same turn and hope I drew Leroy Jenkins and kill him the next turn. I think that was my only way to win the game. So I had to go all in for it.
So using Shadow Strike here is just too slow, you think?
Right. If I use the Shadow Strike, I give him another coin, and I knew he had Edwin in his hand. And if he made a huge Edwin, then there was no way I could possibly win.
How can you make some tells like you know that Edwin's in his hand?
Well, it's because he played it earlier and I sapped it.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Confusing for a different game. Correct. Good job. That's how you knew. All right, let's take a look at the second clip as well with the double Cold Bloods. You specifically want to talk about something this. Why don't you walk me through the process here as well?
Well, I knew I was at 9 health, and I figured the only way I could win is if I won that very next turn. And I could save next turn, do like a Leroy Jenkins Cold Blood turn, but that wasn't going to be enough to kill him. So I had to go all in on the Azure Drake here, hope that it stayed alive the next turn, because the only way I was going to kill it was with like a cheap beast and a kill command, which is pretty unlikely. So I just went all in on it, and it worked out.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you just gotta go. I mean, that's the entire process of playing Rogue, right? Weighing these risks versus rewards, but also the satisfaction of when it pays off, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, Rogue is also still currently like very weird in the state of the metagame, but I think a lot of people who bring it often are really surprised by how well it performs.
Yep.
All right, so I mean, now that you know that you're going up against the semifinals against Rosty, and you know that he's bringing Freeze Mage, how do you feel that you match up against him, specifically because a lot of people even pick him to potentially go to the finals?
Rosty, he's got a lineup that's really aggressive, and it does a lot of stuff that I'm not going to be able to like keep up with. My decks are pretty greedy and slow, so you know anything can happen, but I think he's probably favored in that matchup.
Well, I mean, you went in today feeling the same exact thing, so maybe Lightning can strike twice, or perhaps maybe RNG just shines favorably upon you. Who knows? All right, well, congratulations again on your victory, Josh. We'll see you tomorrow. In the meantime, we're going to head over to the sidebar to wrap up our last series and get a word with Rosty shortly thereafter.
Thanks very much, Dan. Yeah, seems like a nice enough guy. Going into both matches now, he'll be thinking that he's unfavored. So those are the kind of matchups that you go into kind of relaxed, you know? You're thinking, well, I got nothing to lose here. I'm thinking that I'm unfavored, so I'm just going to do my best. He'll be going up against, of course, Rosty. So let's take a look at the last quarterfinal match, the one that we just most recently saw, Bradfordlee versus Rosty. Both these players played pretty quickly, but Rosty just had a more calculated approach, it seemed. Cora, a lot of players were talking highly about Rosty, saying that he looked mechanically the strongest coming into the prelims. What do you think about his match versus Bradfordlee?
I really enjoyed Rosty's play. I know I put my money on Bradford in the beginning, but I'm willing to admit that I was wrong. And here, Rosty...
I'm going to change it now. So.
Well, no, but Rosty was the person who was saying that there are 3 different levels of playstyles. There's the average player, there's the advanced player, and then there's the somewhat perfect player. And he really showed that he understands the mechanics of the game, he understands the technical play, and he came out and he really impressed everybody. And I think especially in that final game, the Freeze Mage versus Bradfordlee's Shaman deck, he really just proved that Freeze Mage, though it's a difficult deck, he has mastered it to some degree and is very impressive.
Yeah, Bradfordlee was also a player who I thought played really well in the prelims, but he was playing a little fast today, Raven. You know, most notably in that last game, you know, down a game, Rosty was 1 game away. He decided to rock bite or pop the block at 6 when he could have popped it less. It seemed like Rosty was more composed in this series, probably.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the way that last game went as well. It really didn't help him out in terms of Bradfordlee's play, because he hit the point very quickly where he ran out of cards, and then he was literally drawing a card, playing a card, drawing a card, playing a card. I think he just got in the mindset of just playing too quickly because the play seemed very obvious, because you're only drawing 1 card a turn, it's probably it's either a minion or damage, and you want to do both to freeze mage. And then he just played it, and then the second he aimed, second the rock bite was on the minion, he was like, oh no, what have I done?
Knew.
And that actually, although I think overall, in terms of the way the cards were drawn afterwards, didn't make an impact into the game massively, it actually could have very easily, because he couldn't have proc the block afterwards, and then the Alexstrasza came down, and it just snowballed from there. So, it might not have changed the outcome completely, but definitely not a great outcome in terms of the way Bradfordlee played.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and hear what Rosty has to say after his win. Going into his semifinals, he's standing by with Frodan.
Rosty, a lot of the players who have experienced time with you, they're kind of picking you as one of the favorites to go to the finals. Does that add any pressure to you, or do you feel like completely calm and collected now that the hard part's out of the way, your first match is done?
No, I don't really get nervous anymore. I used to play card games competitively before this, so like I don't know, that feeling kind of just goes away.
Sure. Well, I mean, it kind of shows that. I mean, outside of how breakneck the last game was with the back and forth drawing the final cards off the top, the action was fast and furious. I think it was kind of noticeable though that like Bradford's kind of misstepping a little bit. Did you sense that at all, or were you just kind of focused on the game?
I think the reason he was misstepping. So in the road game, when we were playing, he was at 8, and then I had Call of the Wild in hand on 8 mana with a bow equipped already. So then I drew a quick shot for turn. And then, so I instantly played the quick shot. So in his mind, maybe what he thought was, oh, he didn't actually have lethal, but like, of course, he top decked it. Right. So I feel like they may have sent him a little over the top, and then he kind of wasn't really composed afterwards. So that gave me a huge advantage, I feel like.
Gotcha. Kind of like like he sounded self-doubt a little bit. Is that
like
what you're
he might have just been like really irritated with it, like I was gonna win, but of course he drew damage, sort of thing.
Gotcha, makes sense. And now that you've gotten the victory, and I know you probably heard a little bit what Joster said. He says he doesn't feel very good against your lineup. Do you echo that sentiment, but on the opposite side?
No, I feel like I'm very prepared for everyone's lineups here today. I feel like I have the best 5 decks in the room. So, and then I feel like my technical play is on point. So, as long as it continues to be like that tomorrow, it looks like a good day tomorrow.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, I mean, right now you got the momentum. Last question's a little bit of a, kind of superficial question. Why do you keep the hood over your head just to kind of keep focus, or is that kind of like something that you're just used to from tradition?
So I used to play card games, and then when I would play card games, there are tables next to you because you're playing against another person. So I would always get distracted. I'd start looking over because I would get like really bored. Be like, oh, what's going on over there? So when I would play with my hood, it cuts off my peripheral vision, which means I can only look forward. So I can only see my game. And then with Hearthstone, when I was playing at prelims, there's obviously people playing next to me, so I was having the same problem.
Sure.
So then I kind of just put my hood on, played the rest of prelims like that, and then it's I don't know, it's been working so far.
Yeah, stay in the zone.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, focus is important. Don't get distracted by other people's plays, especially if you see someone make a mistake next to you, and you're just like, oh no.
Yeah, I'd always kind of start paying attention there.
All right. Well, congratulations on your win, man. Hopefully we can see you back tomorrow. And that does it here for our interviews. Let's go back once more to the sideboard to wrap up the day and tell you guys what's happening tomorrow.
Thanks very much, Dan. And yeah, so that semifinal set's going to be Joster versus Rosty. So guys, I'm going to go down the line real quick, and I'll just get your general thoughts and who do you think's coming out on top of that matchup. Raven, who's winning this one?
Yeah, I think although, Rosty's done some really solid play today, I'm going with Joster just for the difference in lineup. Like, I think just bringing different archetypes is something that might throw a lot of people off. So we'll see how it turns out.
Cora?
I'm going to have to disagree with you this time, Raven. I'm going to have to go with Rosty. He just played very calmly today. He was very collected, very determined, and focused, like he had said. And Joster had a couple of small misplays with his Shaman list and got pretty lucky with that Reno lock. So I'm just going to have to go with my gut and say it's going to be Rosty.
All right, well, that semifinal is set. It's going to be a good one, so make sure you tune in tomorrow. And that about does it for the recap. So let's take a look one more time at the bracket and what we'll be seeing tomorrow. Of course, we'll be starting off with Sidonia versus Napoleon. And then we head into the second semifinal, Joster versus Rosty. And of course, one of those 4 players will become the America's Spring Champion and will be getting that coveted spot to the World Championship at BlizzCon later this year. But that's going to do it from all of us here. Thank you guys for your expert analysis on the desk and the other casters throughout the day. We will return tomorrow, same time, same place, 9 a.m. PDT, where we'll have the finale of the America's Spring Championship. So for myself, from all the other casters, and everybody here at the Hearthstone Championship Tour, thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.